Jefferson Robbins for NCW Life. There's only one city council race in the city of Wenatchee that has drawn more than one applicant. Most of the incumbents are running unopposed. One open seat being left by Mark Kulaas is being sought by two contenders. One of them joins me now, Charlie Atkinson. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
You are new to politics. This is your first time on a ballot, I think you've mentioned. Introduce yourself.
I've been in Wenatchee for about 30 years now. Almost was born here. My parents met working at Rock Island Dam back in the early 50s. But I was born in California, Long Beach. My dad left there with the rest of us shortly thereafter on a construction journey that took him to 3 different dams in the Northwest. I grew up in California, though. He ultimately was transferred back to the main office near San Francisco. Grew up there, went to college at Biola College, now at Biola University, and left there with a degree in physical education with the plans to teach and coach, which I ultimately got to do in the Portland School District. Did that for several years, and then went on the Young Life staff, which is a Christian youth organization. From there, I got opportunity to, with a guy that I had played baseball with in college, to be involved on the business side of his orchard vineyard operation. And I didn't know quite what I was getting myself into, but it sounded intriguing, and had the opportunity to come back to Wenatchee, where our office was located. So,
And that was in the early 90s, and you've been working in the horticulture industry ever since?
Tree fruit industry since then, yes. Yeah.
And mostly with an emphasis, I think you said, on business management?
Right, on the business side. I was a controller for this orchard vineyard operation, wore a lot of different hats, involved in the whole accounting, cash flow, financing, government regulation, permitting, compliance, those kinds of things. Yeah.
So what led you to want to run for Wenatchee City Council representing District 5?
On May 19th, which was the last day to file, my son, who works here in Wenatchee, sent me a text saying, "Hey, did you know nobody's filed in your district? What do you think?" And I thought a little bit about it and did some research, thought maybe I was volunteering for this position since it was the last day to file. And I thought, you know, I think I could do that. I think it'd be a great way to give back. And as I've further reflected on it, the fact that my son, who knows me, thought that was a good idea and that I could impact the place that he was going to raise his family in, sounded like a good thing to do. So that's why I pursued it.
How do you think that your work, Charlie, things that you've done in your life, areas that you've worked in, would translate into a successful term on the council? Are there skills, knowledge that you can bring to bear?
Well, I think working in a relatively small operation where you have to wear a lot of different hats creates kind of a general knowledge across a broad number of fields. So I think that's helpful. Obviously, the accounting and fiscal side of things, I think that's been a strength of Wenatchee of late, that it's on a good financial footing. I would want to help steer it in that direction as much as you can from the council standpoint. I think my experience in the nonprofit sector, we're a better city when there's a healthy nonprofit community that's pushing in the same direction. I think I understand that world. And then education, I mean, kids are our future. And so I think those things all can be translated into the city council.
As a resident, somebody who watches what's happening in your city, what do you think, Charlie, is the state of Wenatchee right now? If you had to assess it and be honest, what would you say?
Well, on one level, I think the thing that was attractive to me in running is I think Wenatchee's in a pretty good place. And my desire would be to continue to build on that. There's always certainly room for improvement, but I'm not your change candidate, if that's what you're looking for, because I think we are doing well for a city our size. Having said that, and maybe this gets to another question, but the issue of housing, affordable housing in particular, is an interest of mine. I think a city functions best when the people who work there can afford to live there, and that, frankly, is a problem.
There are a couple of tools that a city can employ to increase the availability of housing at certain income levels. Adding density is one. Changes to zoning is another. Tax credits. And I believe the city of Wenatchee has worked in all of these fields in the last several years. Um, Looking at what the city's strategies have been to this point, Charlie, do you see anything that you would want to fine tune or change?
You know, I'm not sure I have a thorough enough understanding to be able to comment on that. As I've thought about that, um, you know, I love the project that Common Ground is doing, the Housing Trust. And I think to whatever degree the city can be supportive of those kinds of efforts, realizing that that's not the silver bullet, but it's a piece of it. So I can't say specifically how I would fine tune other than to say, I think the more people that we have thinking about this, and I don't think the right word, worrying isn't the right word, but you know, thinking hard about it, looking at possible solutions, the better off we are. And I want to be one of those people, and I want to fan the flame that I think is out there to work hard to solve this issue.
When you observe the council, where would you see yourself slotting into it? Are there particular tasks or committees that you'd want to be a part of?
That's a good question. I was told that you could pretty much figure you might get one that you want and one that you don't want, and then one in the middle. I think I do bring some financial background, so if there's a role there, and part of it is, yeah, just knowing what openings might be there. Transportation is an interest, and you know, of course, the housing thing. So,
Can you think, Charlie, as an outside observer, has the city set any priorities in the last few years that you think are misguided, made choices or votes or set policy that you think should have been considered differently?
yeah, I guess I'm generally pleased with the direction that we're going, and would welcome the opportunity to kind of steward that going forward, but still looking for ways that we can be better. And part of that is just hearing from people and knowing what those concerns might be. I think it's easy to get blind spots when you're, especially when things seem to be going well. So yeah, being open to what we might be missing would be important to me.
Now, you may have been doing some campaigning in the last couple of weeks, talking to folks. When you speak to people who live in Wenatchee or live in your district in Wenatchee, do they identify one or more particular problems that they'd like to see you address?
I haven't gotten that yet. I have had some good exchanges with people. They generally are pleased that a candidate's coming to their door. But yeah, I've thought as I went around, and it's probably pretty easy to say this on the front end, but I think I would like to continue to do that. Just being in front of voters and giving them a chance to interact, because I will, if I am fortunate enough to be elected, I'll have a whole different perspective, and I'll be able to listen and take what they might have to say in a different way than as a candidate. So I look forward to that kind of continued involvement with voters.
Just trying to keep an open door for constituents.
Absolutely.
So the city has taken several steps in the last couple of years to deal with homelessness, those folks who are living unhoused, establishing low barrier shelter programs, things like the 2 safe parks that allow people who are living out of their vehicles to have a place to do so and get some services. How do we, Charlie, continue to offer those kinds of safe harbors and keep unhoused people in the city safe and healthy? Or is that an obligation that we have? Should we be dealing with these kinds of projects?
Yes, I think we should. People deserve regard and compassion, and to be treated with dignity. We also have the laws that seem to indicate that if you don't have options, you can't move people out of public right-of-ways. Now, is there some middle ground between some kind of utopian response that everybody should have a nice apartment to live in? I commend your listeners to Danny Westneat's column in yesterday's Seattle Times touching on this issue. It was, I think, well done, and really addressed these two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. But some of the cities that maybe have had this kind of ideal desire have found that that is just frankly not affordable. But I think Wenatchee's looking for a reasonable balance to try to help people who want to get into shelter, and understandably that is a good thing, but that it's not a permanent solution, but it's trying to move them towards a more permanent solution. That's really where the challenge comes, and I frankly am impressed that they've partnered with Wenatchee Rescue Mission so that there are people who are interacting with folks and trying to help them take that next step. So this is an important issue and one that I would certainly want to be involved with.
Last question for you, Charlie, is kind of a philosophical question. What does the city, a city, owe to its citizens? What is our obligation for the people who live here?
I think the city is responsible for public safety, infrastructure. I mean, we want a city that works in terms of water and sewer and utilities. Of course, we got the PUD for that, the electrical side of things, roads, and that's a very important responsibility. But what makes a city ultimately a good place to live has way more to do with neighbors knowing their neighbors, volunteerism, spirit of generosity. I see countless examples of that in Wenatchee.
Charlie Atkinson, candidate for City Council for Wenatchee District 5. Thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Jefferson.
You're watching the NCW Life channel.